What is the difference between Liverpool's positioning here and their positioning here? It's a subtle one, but just one example of Arne Slot's fascinating in-game adaptations. And it's fair to say that in the Community Shield, there were plenty of reasons for optimism for the Reds, especially with the new signings. But there were also a couple of tactical issues that Slot will no doubt be looking to resolve ASAP. It was clear from the outset that Liverpool would be looking to punish Palace down the left-hand side, and the majority of their build-up play did come down this zone. But the how and the why they did this was fascinating. The Reds primarily built with the back three, with Kerkez being more withdrawn, and in this encounter, it was up to Curtis Jones to be the controller, which had interesting results. But here's the interesting bit. Because Palace were trying to be more passive with their 5-2-3 shape and prevent the ball into Jones and the other midfielders, we often saw two situations. Firstly, we saw a lot of Jones dropping into the backline in front of the Crystal Palace back three, which immediately made Liverpool less effective, as Jones wasn't doing a great job of finding his midfield men or manipulating the Palace front three with this movement. So more often than not, Palace would just simply hold their shape and did not face too many problems. But we also saw a lot of the second situation, as Liverpool looked to find Kerkez, who ended the match with the second most touches for the side. He would force Sarr into a decision. If Sarr did press, the compact frontline shape had now been opened up, potentially allowing Jones to receive the wrong side of the Palace pivots rather than dropping in front of them like we had just seen. But here's the thing, if Sarr did stay compact and Liverpool were in this shape, Gakpo wouldn't really be an outball, as Munoz could remain touch tight to him. But what we saw was Szoboszlai moving into this position. And sure, the Palace midfielder could move across, but then Jones would also come wide. And yes, even if the second Palace midfielder moved across, fundamentally, the issue was the same. Palace were 3 versus 2 down in the midfield. So now, by doing this, Liverpool had bypassed the Palace front 3 and created that midfield 3 versus 2 just offset to the left. And the 3 versus 2 could be made even worse by Gakpo, Ekitike, or even Kerkez arriving late and providing width down that left-hand side. And once Liverpool had progressed the ball down this flank, they looked deadly. If both of the Palace midfielders were drawn into the press, Florian Wirtz, who doesn't need space to make the difference anyway, was now granted acres of it, and he was excellent, consistently receiving on the half turn between the lines all over the pitch and finding the attackers ahead of him to make the difference. And at the same time, if it was the Palace wing-back trying to apply pressure, both Gakpo and Ekitike were happy to make the run into the flank and force Richards to defend in these more unfamiliar, wider regions. Essentially, having an overload and this many players in close proximity gave Liverpool near infinite options, and we consistently saw them use this to execute quick combination play, which was importantly always supported by runs in behind to stretch the defense and increase the space in that region. And these runs primarily came from Ekitike or Kerkez. But the left-hand side overload also had an impact on the right-hand side, and this is where we saw Slot's adjustment. Early in the encounter, we saw a lot of this. Frimpong pushing into the right-hand half space, allowing Salah to stay wide and resume the role he did a lot of last season, receiving big diagonals from Van Dijk and looking to take on his fullback. And this was working in this encounter as well. The only problem was, in those early minutes, Frimpong wasn't seeing much of the ball here. It also meant that Konate had less of a safe outlet, as both Salah and Frimpong were starting in these high positions. So Slot turned the dial slightly. Salah still started wide early on, but now, rather than being in the half space, Frimpong was initially in these positions, giving Konate an option, while at the same time Ekitike could temporarily fall into this position. But as soon as the ball had progressed down the left-hand side, Salah would begin to drift centrally to allow Frimpong to be the man providing the width down the right. And the right-footed Frimpong had a much better chance of getting down the outside of the fullback to get the cross in to men arriving from the left flank. While at the same time, Salah was a much bigger goal threat from these inside positions. It was a slight tweak, but an important one nonetheless, as we saw from Frimpong's admittedly lucky first goal for Liverpool. But Liverpool did have one massive problem in this encounter, and that was essentially their central build-up play. Throughout the 90s, the Szoboszlai-Jones double pivot did not look particularly convincing, not only struggling to progress the ball high up the pitch, but also giving it away on more than one occasion in these dangerous positions. But since this is clearly not their go-to double pivot, there's not too much point dwelling on it. Instead, let's quickly touch on the defensive end of things. But before we take a look at that, if you want to make 2025-26 the season that you deepen your tactical knowledge, take a look at the top link in the comments or the description. I've put together a free resource to teach you the essentials of tactics. With Palace building up in a back three, Liverpool had a very interesting choice. They could go man for man with their front three, which they did occasionally do like we see here. But with the wingbacks always wide and Sarr and Eze lurking in the half spaces, this looked like a recipe for disaster. So Slot shifted the side into a back five out of possession, with Cody Gakpo being the man to sacrifice himself, essentially playing as a wing-back out of possession, allowing Kerkez and Konate to pick up the men in the half spaces. But Slot still wanted to press and set traps high up the pitch whenever possible. But now, essentially with no wingers, that trap had to be in the central zones. Salah would immediately tie up Gehi and hold this position, minimizing the amount of running he had to do. Ekitike, on the other hand, started much wider, with his role being to cut out the initial ball to Richards, and as soon as Lacroix got on the ball, he looked to press from out to in, keeping Richards in his cover shadow. This only left one option: play through the center. But this is where the trap was, as Szoboszlai and Wirtz were anticipating this, meaning as soon as the ball came into this area, they could begin to apply vice-like pressure. But the thing is, the shape also did carry with it some vulnerabilities that Palace just weren't able to take advantage of, primarily through Richards. If Ekitike was already beginning his central press, there was the potential for the goalkeeper to chip the ball into Richards to begin the play, or for a midfielder to find him. And this very rarely happened, but when it did, even someone with an engine as big as Szoboszlai's struggled to cover the distance of tracking both the pivot as well as the centre-back. At the same time, the Palace wing-back was tying up Kerkez, and this left the centre-back in space, and this is something that better teams might be able to take better advantage of. And Slot will already be aware of that, just like he'll be aware of the concerning number of times it looked like Palace would be able to break the Liverpool high line, only to be saved by some emergency defending. But I'm curious to know what you made of this match, and if you want to compare his tactics in this match to what he was doing last season, check out this video on screen. And don't forget to check out the free resource down below, and also, if you're interested in joining Tactical Mastery, just a heads up that with the season starting, the off-season offer ends this week, so secure it now if that sounds interesting to you.